I just recently built a super powerful Razor scooter. Now, this scooter is fun to ride, but it's a lot heavier than a stock scooter. It has way too much power for a casual rider. It looks super upgraded, and it took way too long to build for what it is. So in this video, I'm going to be building another one that looks stock, weighs the same as a stock scooter, has less power, and is easier to build. Now the first thing I need is a motor. You can tell on the old scooter the motor is way too low, and I had to do this because it was too long to fit up inside the frame. So for this new scooter, I want to use a shorter motor so I can mount it higher. While looking for motors, I came across this motor on Amazon. One of the reviews says it has a slightly shorter length, so it should be perfect for this build. The first thing I did when I got the motor was drill the screw holes out halfway so that the screw heads will be flush with the back of the motor. Now when comparing it with the motor on the old scooter, it's a 1/4 inch shorter. After that, I realized I can make it even shorter by grinding the shaft of the motor so that the sprocket is closer to the motor. After installing an extra spacer, the motor was good to go. Now when I compared the motors based on the sprocket, the new motor is 3/4 of an inch shorter, which is a big improvement. After that, I welded the front motor mounts with the same design as the other scooter, so that when the chain is short, the chain can be tight when the motor's tilted up, but when the chain eventually stretches out, the motor can be tilted forward, which tightens the chain. Just like on the other scooter, the rear motor mounts have to have a slot instead of a hole to allow for some adjustment. After finishing welding the motor mounts on, I realized the screw is a little close, so I just ground the outside a bit. It might be a little noisy at the start, but it should break in. The motor mount is also a convenient location to weld the brake cable bracket for the stock brake, which I had to bend the arm a little bit to make it fit. Now onto the battery. I'm going to be building a 3 parallel 20 series battery out of these 10 amp discharge 3.3 amp hour cells. This configuration fits perfectly in the stock battery tray. The first thing I did was spot weld all the series and parallel connections. After that, I soldered some nickel strips onto the positive and negative wires and spot welded them onto the end. Next, I'm going to get a plastic sheet with some double-sided tape and fold it in half. Then I added some tape so that the balance wires will never touch the cells. Now on to soldering the balance wires. I made sure to put a layer of fish paper between any wires that cross over each other. After putting some more fish paper and folding the BMS on top, I think it turned out pretty good. Now all that's left is to wrap it in tape, shrink wrap it, and add the connector. Honestly, I think this is one of my best batteries so far, and it only cost about $120 because of battery hookup. I had to grind some ridges out on the battery tray because it was slightly too tall. Next time I'll put the BMS on the front so I don't have to do this. For the controller, I got a Fardriver 7235A for mechanic cycles. Even though this controller is small, it still packs quite a punch at 2.5 kilowatts of output power, which is more than enough for this battery. I welded some controller mounts between the battery tray and the front wheel, and the controller fits perfectly. I then got to work wiring the battery wires and the phase wires before soldering together the wiring harness, while first removing all the wires I wouldn't need. At this point, I decided I should paint the controller since it doesn't really match the color scheme. I didn't do a perfect job, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be under the scooter and covered with dust anyways. The battery plugs straight into the controller through 2 holes in the battery tray, and there's a plug on the side for charging. All things considered, I think the scooter looks pretty stock. I even painted the motor so that it blends in better. It definitely has a much sleeker look without the massive battery tray, the controller on the side, and the motor hanging really low. I could immediately tell the weight difference on the first ride since the scooter is a whole 15 pounds lighter than my other one. In conclusion, this scooter is much more fun to ride than my other scooter, and I would pick it every time, except maybe if I'm going drag racing. Anyways, thanks for watching.